Today we're going to be unboxing one of the coolest printers to come out recently, and that's the PRUSA Core 1. PRUSA was nice enough to send this over for me to check out on my channel, but as with every 3D printer review I do on this channel, I'm going to be taking a look at the pros and cons and just going over my experience using the machine. So let's get this out of the box. So let's just slap the screen on here. That goes on pretty firmly, but now I think everything's all set. The machine also comes with these anti-vibration pads that you stick on the bottom to give the machine a little bit more grip. So if we just flip the machine on its back here, oh, funny how that works out. I remember there was some machines where apparently if you flipped them on the back during the assembly process, it would cause irreparable damage to the heated bed cable that might start a fire. But let's forget about that. We're on to bigger and better things. While we're down here, we can look at the stepper motors. It looks like we've got 3 stepper motors, so the bed should be able to tilt itself a little bit. Just the other day, I watched a video on this machine by Vector 3D where he completely took this machine apart. If you want to see all the internal workings, then I recommend checking that video out. He goes into detail about each individual CNC machined part and all of these steel pieces on the outside. Some of the big insights that I took away from that video is that all of these external panels, you see all of these like steel support beams, those form an exoskeleton that carries the load of this machine. So when you're moving it around and and the printer's trying to shake itself apart, as printers do when they're printing at high speeds, this whole exoskeleton system is holding everything together. And also a really unique feature about it is that it's using the same part number for all 4 of these supports. For the vertical piece, this whole frame on the top and the bottom, those are also all the same part number. It's a good use of manufacturing methods and materials to make this thing as easy to produce as possible. I think they got that idea from experience building their enclosures previously. So they basically took all that in-house experience building enclosures and baked it into this machine, and they were able to make some very clever choices because of the institutional knowledge they had built up there. So I think that's just a really cool feature about this machine, and if they wanted to scale this up to make a bigger Core 1, maybe a Core 2 Pro or like a Core 3 Mega or something like that, they would just have to have a couple extra parts made, just scale these, make them longer and thicker, and this is a very extensible architecture. I really like when companies put the extra effort in to make sure their engineering is done properly and it's just going to be easy to manufacture and service in the future. Alright, so other first impressions on the machine. This door is really nice. I just finished a Voron build and I was very disappointed with the look and feel of the door. This, on the other hand, is very professional feeling. It flips open, holds itself closed. Very nice magnetism, and it looks like we've got, we must have some magnets in here somewhere, but I can't directly see them. Maybe they're embedded into these 2 little 3D printed parts. Since most of this structure is made out of steel, when we close it, it's just latching onto these magnetic pieces. They attach to the magnets. The function of the part is just baked into the material properties. I think that's pretty clever. Also, if you've got any refrigerator magnets or fun little toys with magnet feet, you can stick them on the machine. So if you've got extra refrigerator magnets and no place to put them, you can just stick them on your Core 1 printer and deck it out like this. So I think there should be a movement. Instead of making boring old maker coins, make magnetic backed maker coins, and you can just like stick them all over your printer. That could be pretty fun. But this adds a lot of possibilities for attaching tools. Let's say I have a magnetic tool, I can just stick it to the machine. So I really like their use of steel and the magnetic surfaces that you can stick things to. Alright, let's get inside of here. I'm going to take this PEI steel sheet and just install it into the machine before I get everything fired up. In general, you want to make sure your heated bed is covered up at all times, because basically if you were to run these machines without a heated bed on there, it would cause some serious damage. However, on my previous PRUSA printers, if you forget to attach this, when it does the initial bed probing procedure, it'll throw an error. But, in general, you've got a lot of professional touches that help catch errors and stuff on machines like this. However, as the experienced 3D printer user that I am, I'm just going to stick that plate in there. And I'm kind of curious why they don't just attach it for shipping. Maybe they're worried about it working itself loose and banging around in there when the DHL guy decides to drop kick it out of the back of a truck. But in terms of packaging and shipping, this all arrived in one piece. It seemed to be pretty well packaged, and it looks pretty nice right now. I was going to complain about there not being sealing around the perimeter, but it looks like there's some foam tape around this whole perimeter. On the bottom, it looks like it's pretty flush with this bottom steel piece, so you're not going to have to worry about too much air seeping out down there. Altogether, looks like it's a pretty well sealed and enclosed machine. Before we look too much closer inside of this machine, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on. That way, hopefully some of these internal LED lights will fire up and we'll get better visibility inside of this machine. It's pretty dark in here with all the lights off, so filming inside of here and just general visibility is going to be pretty low. Oh no, it says no firmware found. Maybe I need to plug this in. Okay, so we'll plug this in and then hit the reset button, or maybe the reset button down there. Okay, so it looks like I had to plug that in order to get the machine flashed. Instead of shipping the machines with firmware pre-flashed on it, they just have a really nice bootloader system and they provide you with the flash drive, so you flash it yourself when you receive the machine. I'm sure if I read some sort of instruction manual, it would have told me that was the case, but you know, I was able to figure it out and they put prompts on the screen. So I just plugged in the little provided USB drive. Now, interesting to note, these USB drives actually have a little QR code in the back, and I always wondered why they provide a QR code. But if you're doing version control and making sure that the printers are getting the appropriate version of firmware based on the USB drive that you're shipping with the machine, then tracking the serial number and the version of software that's provided on this USB drive becomes very important. So now that QR code makes a little more sense to me, and that means when they push their latest version of firmware, if they've got a bunch of these boxed up in the facility that they're shipping them out of, instead of having to go in and flash and reflash every different machine that's in their warehouse, they can just pull out the little SD drive, put a little new one in there, and then, that's your version control. Pretty clever stuff there, and it looks like we're all turned on and we're able to see the inside of the machine. And there's ample lighting. None of the LEDs are shining directly into your eyes. There's no glare when you're looking into this machine. So it just looks like a really nice, professionally lit little box here. And it looks like we've got a little bit of orange PETG coming out of the tip of the nozzle right here. So there's your proof that this machine was test printed. Yes, so there's all the quality control checks. I assume if it failed some quality control test, then they would go back and fix it and rerun the test before they shipped it out to their customers. And as far as I understand, this isn't just a special courtesy that they're providing to people who are reviewing these machines. That's just the professional attention to detail that PRUSA puts into their machines. You're basically guaranteed that you're going to get a working machine unless something horrible happens in shipping. But other than that, this is a pretty nice looking machine. Now, a lot of people were commenting on their special cable management setup that they have, and it looks like the cable up there is behaving very well. No matter where I put the printer, it looks like the cable is just flexing and going exactly where it should go. There's no tight bends, it's just doing exactly what it should. Pretty nice to see. And that was published as a free and open source contribution to 3D printer design. PRUSA likes to give back to the open source community, so if you want to look at the files and see how that was built and maybe incorporate it on your own designs, then that's open source and you can check it out. Okay, so one thing I've heard a lot of people complain about online is this bar right across the middle. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but if you want to build something that's structurally efficient and easy to put together, then having a bar right here makes a lot of sense. When you're looking at this from an upwards angle, like looking down, it actually means you have a lot more clearance up top to be able to see your prints. So you know what, you're going to have something somewhere, and I'm fine with this. They've made good use of it by incorporating a bunch of LED lights, so you get really nice and even lighting in here. And they took something that could impede your visibility and ended up using it to improve your visibility by flooding the whole area with light and letting you inspect your first layers with impunity. Okay, so let's go through the setup here. I just have to go through some options on the machine. I have to pick my language. Looks like we support a lot of languages here, including Japanese. All right, and I have this set up perfectly to get maximum glare against the lights at the ceiling of my office. But we'll reposition this a little bit so you can see what's going on here. Okay, this is your PRUSA Core 1 printer. I would like to guide you through the setup process. Printer type, Core 1, print head, nozzle diameter, hardened nozzle. Ooh, this is actually a great time to install a new nozzle here. Now, I know they have it all set up with the nozzle that they tested the machine with, but I received some extra goodies with my printer. So check these out. So right here we have a nozzle that's built by PRUSA, and this one is an adapter. So you can use old M6 style nozzles. And if you install this into the machine, you can use basically any old rep nozzle. So if there's a specific nozzle that isn't supported on this exact type of hot end setup, you can just plug in this adapter and use those V6 nozzles. The next thing that I got was, I guess, yeah, I think that's just a spare in case the old one broke. It's nice to get spares just in case anything goes wrong. You have a replacement on hand. All right, next up we have some nozzles that were graciously provided by E3D. So they sent over this CHT style nozzle with an obsidian with an X type of coating, and I guess this is like a super hardened material and you can print abrasive filaments with it, but it still has great thermal conductivity. So I'm interested in maybe throwing this on there, but also probably the most premium of the bunch, we have a Diamondback nozzle. I believe this one is also produced by E3D, but they're working with Diamondback to get that polycrystalline nozzle installed on there. And I've been really eager to try one of these out. I've seen them at trade shows, and it's just an interesting technology and material. So we'll get that installed on the machine. The advantage of this is it's diamond, so diamond is extremely thermally conductive. It's also the hardest material known to man, or at least the hardest naturally occurring material on the planet. So it's a really ideal material for something you need to transfer heat and have high abrasion resistance. Also, it's super slick. You know, they polish this and it's very unsticky. And the advantage of that is when you're printing stickier materials like PETG or polycarbonate, then they're not going to build up and create blobs that might end up ruining your print or making it look ugly. So really cool stuff here. We're going to get that installed right now. So let's just figure it out. Okay, so we have this bag of tools that was provided with the machine. Not sure how this comes apart, but we'll figure it out. And what am I doing? I actually don't need access to this stuff. Let me put this back together. Okay, I was thinking I had to change the hot end or something, but I think since I'm just changing out the nozzle, I don't need to undo any of those wires. Because we're going to be using the same heater block with the same thermistor and heating element. So yeah, we actually don't need to get in there. All right, and then to undo this, I just grabbed the provided wrench here. That's the right size for the heater block. And then I undo the wrench like so, and then we can twist that out. Okay, and now that that's free from the heater block, here's our old nozzle, and here's our new one. Let's go Diamondback. And this is another testament to how finely tuned these printers are. You can see there's actually a little bit of filament sticking out the bottom of the extruder here. And when I undid the nozzle, I was able to just pull this nozzle free. In most printers, when you do this process, the filament will be stuck in the nozzle, and you'll pull the whole string of filament out with you when you're, pulling this free. But since they've really finely tuned their attractions, you've just got the unfinished blob of plastic right there. And then when we put the new one in, we'll just slip it onto it right there. Push that in place. Oh wait, first up we have to go through this heater block. Then we start threading this in to the heater block. Once it bottoms out, we'll switch to the wrenches. And we'll go ahead and tighten this down. I'm not sure how many Newton meters or whatnot I need to apply there, but I'm pretty sure that's good enough. And we'll put our silicone sock back on. Then we'll push this upwards so that it's kind of fixed in its highest position. And we'll tighten these two thumb screws down. And now we're all set with our new nozzle. Ta-da! Now we got our Diamondback. That's going to be super anti-sticky and be able to do great PETG prints. All right, so we can go back into our print head setup. We know it's a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. We're going to set this to hardened nozzle. Is this a high flow nozzle? No, it is not. An extruder silicone sock is installed. An extruder is stock. What are the other options? I don't want to mess with that. But if you want to put a different extruder on there, I guess you can. But yeah, hold on. Is this Diamondback high flow or not? So apparently this is not a high flow nozzle, as far as I can tell. So if I wanted a hardened nozzle that is also high flow, I could use this obsidian stuff. Honestly, this obsidian is probably more suitable for the type of printing that I want to do, but I want to mess around with diamonds, so we're doing it. All right, let's go. Do you want to connect to the Wi-Fi with the PRUSA app using NFC? I'm going to say no. I generally don't like using Wi-Fi on my printers. All right, so I can set up the Wi-Fi in a bunch of different ways, but I'm just going to skip it here. Run self-tests and calibrations now. I guess so. Let's do it. Before you continue, make sure the print sheet is installed on the heat bed. You know, I'm a smart 3D printer user, so I already installed that. We discussed that. We got our print sheet there. So we're just gonna say, okay. Now it's gonna test a bunch of stuff. And geez, those fans are loud. What in the world? Wow, I can feel the air blowing over here. Okay, so we've got a very beefy fan on the back, a pretty decent sized fan up there. And then I guess these chamber cooling fans, oh man, these are very strong. 24 volts. It doesn't say the amperage or the power consumption of these fans, but those are some beefy, almost server class fans they're using back there. So that'll definitely help when you're doing your PLA prints or TPU prints and you need everything to stay cool in here. Good to have extra overkill fans on the back. All right, and while it's doing that, let's go ahead and check out some of the other stuff that's going on in here. These cutout panels have been talked about a lot, but I'll go over it briefly while the machine's doing... Oh, it's saying to keep the door closed. Okay then, Mr. Core1, I guess you know what's best. Oh, wow, this is one of the quietest Z-axes I've heard in a printer in a while. If you watched Vector 3D's video where he completely took this apart, you'd see why. Those Z-axis couplers that are built into the bottom are 3D printed and help decouple the Z-axis motor vibrations from the rest of the frame, so that's why it's super quiet in operation. Also, the enclosure helps, but the lid is off right now, so if it was making a lot of noise, it'd probably be coming out. I'd be able to hear it. Okay, so now it's running the rest of the tests. Another cool thing about this magnetic steel frame is I can just stick my microphone to it. There we go. And now I can talk to the printer while I do my videos. Most every PRUSA product comes with some Haribo gummy bears. I'm not sure exactly what the backstory is there, but I will go ahead and eat a couple of these while I wait for the calibration to finish. My little Among Us figurine is looking very cinematic right now. Alright, it looks like the heated bed heated up. That didn't take very long at all. Nozzle is getting up to temperature now. Okay, so since we're printing PLA, I have the lid off, and that should give me plenty of ventilation. But I'm going to go ahead and put the lid back on, because apparently you can have this thing enclosed with the lid on, and it should be able to print PLA just fine. You just need to open the little vents up at the top. So there's just like little louvers that you can slide one way or the other. I'm going to open those up and, you know, we'll see how that goes. Alright, so it says it's absorbing heat. This is something that a lot of printers will skip out on. If you're doing like a really professional operation and you need everything to be very reliable, you'll want to heat soak the printer a little bit. So just let it like get up to temperature and sit there so that the temperature spreads out evenly across the whole heated bed and the print area and everything. So having a short waiting period while you let it soak is a very good idea. On a lot of more budget-friendly machines, they'll heat up until the thermistor says it's the right temperature, and then they're like, all right, it's time to go, let's print. But, you know, actually letting it sit at temperature for either 30 seconds or 5 minutes, whatever you need, I think is really important to improving print reliability. That's why you'll typically get more consistent results if you're continually running prints and not letting the machine cool down between print jobs, because everything's already up to temperature and, you know, you just get better results. Alright, I'm going to put the mic back on my shirt instead of on the printer, because I'm sure it's absorbing a bunch of extra noise being attached to the frame. Alright, so my table isn't very level here, so I'm gonna actually have to put some shims under the printer. This is like a natural wood table, so it's got a little bit of curvature to it. But yeah, I just shimmed it up a little bit, now it's a little bit more stable. Ish. I need to find a better table to put this up on. But yeah, let's just see the thing print. While this is printing, I'll do my decibel tests. I've got to finish eating my gummy bears, hold on. While this is printing, I'm going to do my decibel tests. We're just going to see how loud the machine is while it's running. I can tell this machine is super quiet, so we're an arm's length away. Right here. So it's right around 50 decibels with peaks up to like 53. As far as I'm concerned, that's extremely quiet. I'm going to go ahead and go into my settings here and turn the fans all the way up. So let's go ahead and find those fans. Let's turn the chamber fans to 100%, which is like not super realistic. Right now they're set to auto, so it's like regulating the chamber temperature. Those will throttle up and down to maintain a steady chamber environment for the print, make sure everything runs nicely. But I can turn these up to 100% and see how loud that is. All right, and with that enabled, we're looking at about 62 decibels. So quite a bit louder when that chamber fan is on, but we're gonna go ahead and turn that back to auto. I doubt it's actually going to be at 100% very often in practice, unless you're in like a really hot garage or something. Let's turn that back down to auto. And also if I go down here, I can turn on stealth mode, so let's turn that on and see if it's any quieter. Seems a little bit quieter. And then also I'm curious if I turn the print speed down to like 50%. I want to see how quiet this machine gets. And then also turn the print fan speed down, because when you're running at a lower speed like this, you don't need as much part cooling. All right, so let's see where we're at. This is about as quiet as you can get this machine to be, arm's length away. Looks like about 47 decibels, so about half as loud as it is when you're running it on typical PLA settings. I like machines that are super quiet, and this definitely fits the bill. But another thing that I really like about printers is when they're super reliable, and that's another area where PRUSAs excel. And it's even to the point where if you go with their stock 100% print speed, that's like an extremely conservative setting where your prints are going to pass with a 95+% finish rate. Maybe 98, 99%. It's going to be very reliable at that speed. But what that means is you can crank these up to insane speeds and you'll probably still get decent quality out of them compared to some of the other brands where even at 100% you're looking at some reliability issues, and when you turn it up even faster than that, you're really asking for trouble. Just crank up the speeds whenever you feel like it. Also, with how good these viewing panels are, I feel like I'm in an aquarium. I can just get right up close and see exactly what the printer's doing. I have a great bird's eye view of what's going on here. And you can also look in the front, but even on these side access panels, you got a great view of your print. This is definitely a printer for printer people. All right, print job's done. That's super nice. Okay, let's move on to another print. Oh, you know what? Come to think of it, I'm not using a high flow nozzle, and it was able to finish the print job just fine. So that just goes to show the amount of overhead that they build into their printer profiles to make sure they're running reliably. Even with the wrong nozzle in there, it was able to run and finish without any issues. That's the overhang test of my nightmares. We're not going to do that right now. It's 5 hours long, and it just does some extreme overhangs. I'll print out a little scraper. G-code isn't fully compatible, nozzle is not high flow. It's just throwing up that little error just to make sure I know that if I'm having any issues, it's probably because it's not getting high enough melt rates. I think it'll probably be fine even without it. So we're just going to go ahead and print anyways. Something that I've heard a lot of people complain about in the YouTube comments, and I've been browsing YouTube and seeing what other people think of this machine, is this bar in the middle. They're like, oh my gosh, the bar in the middle, it's the worst thing ever. But in practice, it really isn't that big of a deal because your head is like on a swivel and you can move it around and see things. And just this narrow little interruption in your vision isn't that big of a deal. Plus, most humans have stereoscopic vision. You have two eyes, so when you're looking at it, you almost kind of delete that this thing is even there, and you don't really see it. Also, you can just take a look in through the side here if you need another view. I actually might prefer to replace these smoked acrylic panels with a clear acrylic panel just to make this viewing angle a little bit nicer. But even still, it's just super easy to look inside of here and see everything. The thing is that most YouTubers have become very accustomed to filming things just dead on looking into the machine, and that's great for camera placement. But in reality, when you're actually using the machine, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know, does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. And then if you really want to get down and at the level of the printing action, you can see under the bar. So you can kind of peek in and see what the nozzle's doing, and just from a slightly higher angle, you get a better bird's eye view of what's going on. Plus you can look at things from the top down. You have a great viewing angle from up here. And if you want, you can replace this with maybe a clear acrylic panel. or just take the lid off altogether. You'll have great visibility. And then off to the side here, I think this is the most underrated view of everything that's going on. I mean, just take a look at this. This is like a great view. Look at that. You know, I can see everything that's happening inside of here from at least, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different angles. Yeah, anyone who says this printer doesn't have great visibility doesn't know what they're talking about. This is probably the best visibility of any printer that I've ever used, so it doesn't get much better than this. I know this might trigger a lot of Bambu Lab fanboys, but at this point, I just don't care. Wow, and these first layers are just incredible. This is definitely the best printer for people who like to sit and watch their printers do things. Alright, so what do we have here with the PRUSA Core 1? Well, you've got a printer that makes excellent print quality. The first layers on this printer are basically immaculate. I can't see a single flaw with how these first layers have gone down. My first prints have come out pretty good, and right now I'm working on this Robo Alpaca, which appears to be doing pretty nice right now. Let's just take a look at this. Looks like the leg is doing pretty good. And sure, I might have found a couple of bugs in the firmware, but PRUSA is a company that's, you know, dedicated to their products. They want to make them as good as possible, and they continue to upgrade and support their products over time. So I'm sure any of these bugs are going to get addressed in the long term. So really, I don't view that as too much of an issue. With this being such a new machine and having all these extra new sensors on here, of course, you're going to have some growing pains here and there. The thing about these printers is they just work, you know? It's kind of a meme at this point. The infill is nice, the external layer quality is good, the first layer is great. So everything ends up turning out basically exactly how you'd expect it to, and the dimensional accuracy of these machines tends to be very good as well. The PRUSA machines are generally geared towards a more professional user and prosumers who are just really passionate about 3D printing and like having a really nice 3D printer to play around with. So you've got the print quality, you have professional support. Sooner or later, I think PRUSA is going to be moving manufacturing of these units to the USA. I know a lot of people in the US have this patriotic feeling like they want to see manufacturing return to the United States. And having a 3D printer that's built here, that'd just be a cool thing because we're seeing less and less of that as time goes on. All too often we hear about these new products being developed in China, and I think it's good to have a little bit of balance, having some domestic competition for those brands. Some of you might not care about this, but I think it's important personally because 3D printing is an enabling technology that helps develop other technologies, and especially in critical industries like defense, aerospace, and automotive, you know, highly competitive spaces where IP is king, you want to be able to have a printer that runs off the cloud really nicely. You don't have to worry about your files being sent over to some server as part of some quality control or quality assurance. Maybe they're like, hey, we need to improve the products, so we need to grab these files that have been failing and see what's going on with them. In general, I like to use an offline workflow because Well, in this building, I don't have access to very good Wi-Fi. It's like an enterprise Wi-Fi system, and getting things connected to it is always a pain. But I don't feel too bad about running these printers offline and having certain restrictions, because some people have to run these machines offline. Basically, every job that I've ever had, they don't want you connecting things that see the company's valuable IP to the network, because then it might be communicating with some other servers somewhere, and you might lose track of the files that thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of IP and engineering time and R&D went into to produce those things. It's just much better to have the machine be a standalone device that you can run without any internet connection. And that's one thing I really appreciate about PRUSA machines, that they always make sure that you can just plug an SD card into them and get printing. Also, this printer is basically one of the few machines on the market that I feel like you can just get drunk and start using the printer. They're super idiot proof. If any errors occur, then it basically pauses the print, and when you fix it, like, let me just show you an example. I'm going to unplug the SD card, which it needs to be able to print things, and what's going to happen with this print job? It's like, hey, the USB drive is not connected. Please plug it back in. So I'm just going to plug it back in and say continue. And I think it should just pick up where it left off. Let's see what happens. Oh, it looks like it's having to move the Z-axis back up. Okay, yeah. It's just going to pick up where it left off. Likewise, if you, let's say, break a piece of the leg off of the print that you're working on, it has sufficient bed adhesion that the other three legs are going to support that model. Again, it's probably just going to build up a bird's nest and resume printing just fine, because these machines are built with enough reliability and overhead in their confidence that this machine will work, that any small issue like this that comes up, the printer is just going to be able to power through it. Another thing is I sliced this with the wrong profile, so I think this nozzle probably is only able to achieve 80% or 70% of the flow rate of the nozzle that this was designed to print with. But since, again, they have that overhead, they have all that testing and reliability to make sure you're at the 99 percentile in terms of reliability, that even when things go wrong, you're still probably like 90+% likely to be able to finish the print job. So these machines, they're designed to be reliable, they're designed to be really easy to use, and they're one of the few machines that I would hand to a drunk person and say, hey, can you start this print? What we see in a lot of other 3D printing companies is you have to get everything right in order for the print to turn out right. Compare that to this sort of PRUSA ecosystem approach. You have to do a bunch of things wrong in order for the print to come out wrong. It's kind of a difference of philosophy of like, hey, you know what, people are going to make mistakes. What's going to happen when they make those mistakes, and how can we prevent those issues, and basically have the firmware understand what's going on and correct for itself automatically. So, you know, I'm just really impressed with this machine. It's really nice to look at. It's a really well-engineered machine in terms of both the mechanical engineering design, and I think this whole machine is designed in a way that it's basically developed to be manufactured in the West and serviced in the West. So what does that mean? I mean, I'm going to be honest, guys. The Western audience has a little bit less technical manufacturing and electronics skills. I mean, that's just how it is because we've lost so much of our electronics manufacturing. Basically, most people just throw away old parts and replace them with new parts that are manufactured in China. With this machine, I think the whole philosophy is different. Because you're manufacturing it in the West, you have to make things a little bit simpler. And it surpasses a lot of the competitors coming out of Shenzhen. I really like the reliability of this machine, the serviceability, their reuse of their existing supply chain. Like if we take a look at the PRUSA Mark IV, it's reusing a majority of the parts in the system. These stepper motors with the threaded rods, the heated bed, the drive electronics, the power supply, the hot end, basically the whole extruder assembly up here. That's all just translated directly onto this machine. So they're working around some supply chain restrictions that might make it more difficult to do an all-new design, but they're making excellent use of the old parts. And in addition, that makes this whole printer series a whole lot more sustainable because you can upgrade this old printer into this printer. So hats off to PRUSA. I think they've done a great job with this printer. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. PRUSA is a great company with industry-leading customer support. what they're able to do with the hardware that they've put on this machine is pretty amazing. I'm getting good prints out of it so far. You know, we'll put it through its paces and run some other prints. But between this printer and some of the other large printers that I have in my office, I don't need any more printers. I think 90% of print jobs I'll probably send to this machine just because it's so fun to look at it and watch it print with all these different viewing angles, and it just works reliably. It's nice and enclosed. Like, it's just a really nice piece of engineering, and I'm glad to have it in my office, and it'll probably be one of my favorite printers. Now, for anything a little bit larger or that requires multicolor, I'll probably still be using my Creality K2. And the last thing I want to address in this video is kind of an elephant in the room, and it's the Bambu Lab fanboys. They swarm to every video on YouTube like moths to the fire. Anything that threatens their beloved Bambu Lab company, they want to go after it and be like, oh, that thing sucks, there's this problem or that problem. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you know, this is a great product. Sorry guys, this is just awesome, and I would probably prefer to get this over anything from Bambu Lab. Now keep in mind, I didn't pay for this. PRUSA sent it over to me for a review. I just really like what I see. And you know what, I actually did buy a Bambu Lab P1P back when the initial launch happened. I was one of the first customers that bought it and was checking it out. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm concerned that this bearing up here might be faulty. How do I replace the bearing? And it was one of the bearings in the coreXY assembly. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I think you should be able to replace it, I don't know. And eventually it came out that you can't replace it yourself. You have to basically throw the printer out and get a new one. Recently they've come out with a fix where you take the whole top off the printer and replace it with a whole new coreXY assembly, which costs hundreds of dollars. It's at least $100 to get that replacement part, and that's got to be 10 to 20 hours of work, taking all those fasteners apart and removing all of the components, rerunning all the wiring to the tool head, rerunning the belt paths. Like, that's a huge pain to be able to do that. Versus on this machine, it's got readily and easily accessible bearings. If you have a bearing that goes out, which, you know, they're wear components, they break down or the lubrication comes out or some contamination gets in there and they start acting really gritty. When that happens on this machine, you can just undo a screw, pop it out and put a new one in, and there you go, you're good to go. So this is really designed to be a piece of technology that you keep with you for years. It's not a throwaway device like a lot of 3D printers are these days. And even this older MK4, you can upgrade into this machine. So just that attention to sustainability and having an upgrade path to take your older product and make it into a newer thing, I think is really cool. So Bambu Lab fanboys, just because you have something nice from another brand doesn't mean you have to shit talk it. This is a really nice product, and I encourage you to try one of these out if you have an opportunity. If you have a makerspace that has access to one of these or a university lab, just go in and fire it up and see if you like it. I think it's a really good machine, and if it were my money and I had to buy a printer right now, I'd probably buy the kit version of this, put it together myself. PRUSA has excellent documentation. They provide you some Haribo gummy bears to keep you from starving while you put things together. It's just super easy and fun. So I like this printer. It's going on my desk. It's going to be one of my main printers. I might have to kick that Ender 5 out of here because it's taking up way too much space. So we'll keep doing some prints with this thing. We'll keep testing it out. I really like what I see so far. I have a bias towards printers that are in my office. Even this printer, when I saw it at FormNext and when I went to the PRUSA factory and I did kind of a preview of this machine, I was like, okay, it's pretty cool. These are all the features. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know if it's great or not. But when I get a machine in my office and I'm actually using it in my usual workflow, I get a really good sense of whether I'm going to like the machine or not. And this is definitely one of my favorite machines. And it's probably going to be my favorite machine for the next year plus. We'll see what the competition brings and if there's anything else on the market that's going to compete with it. But I really like the price point. I like the speed. I like the really nice industrial design, manufacturability, serviceability, sustainability. You name it, this machine is doing a pretty good job with it. Now, I also have an MMU3, which apparently you should be able to hook up to this machine, but I'm waiting to see how everything pans out in terms of the new MMU3 kits for this. Like, I assume there's going to be some new adaptations to be able to feed those multiple filaments in. As it stands right now, I'm perfectly happy using this as a single color printer, And like I said, with PRUSA, they're always continuing to improve their products. They're adding new modifications, they're adding upgrade paths, they're improving the firmware. So, you know, let's just wait a little bit and see how that multicolor stuff pans out. I'm personally excited to do some modifications to this printer because you have these big side access panels that you can fit stuff into. A lot of people are using these for storage space. I'm probably going to try and stick another spool of filament in here and set up some kind of feeding system in there. I think that would be pretty fun. But yeah, this is a great little printer. We're having a good time. Customer service, all the spare parts they send you, you know, just everything about this is a pleasant experience. So if you're shopping for a 3D printer and you want to pick something up, go ahead and treat yourself to something nice and get a PRUSA Core 1. I think if I was more practical and pragmatic in terms of my shopping and just go with the buy once, cry once mentality, I would probably get something like this and be pretty happy with it. Okay, well, that's about all we have for today's episode of Nathan Builds Robots. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. And would you look at this? Just take a look at this. The print is working just fine, as if I didn't just rip the leg off of the model that's being printed. We'll keep printing with this thing, and I'll give you an update in probably the next couple 100 hours time. Look at this, I literally just moved the printer into the other room, plugged it in, and now it's resuming printing as if nothing happened. So you can tear the legs off of a print, you can unplug it mid-print and move it somewhere else, and the thing just works. So I set the machine on the floor and was kind of kicking it around while it finished up this print, and wouldn't you know, it just worked fine, even though I ripped one of the legs off while it was printing. That's the kind of reliability we expect from our PRUSA printers. Alright, let's go, guys. Whatever.